Hello everyone, we are back with another session of AI Tech Talks Live, and today we will be covering AI and ransomware. We have three questions that came up in the last couple of days in ours, so we'll be covering those. And the topic is AI and ransomware. Before we start, just a reminder who we are. We are a Skive and Robometrics machine. We build machines that feel. We are an AI, specifically deep learning startup based out of San Francisco and London, with use cases ranging from healthcare and aerospace. Cybersecurity is one of the very major consideration for us, and that's why things like cybersecurity, ransomware is one of the areas that we look very carefully. So today's topic is AI and ransomware. For those who are not that familiar with what's really happening around the world and what has happened in the last couple of weeks, we saw the Colonial Pipeline, a 5,000-mile pipeline that gets refined gas from the south to multiple of the states here in the U.S. that was hacked, where their data was encrypted, and because of that, they were not able to operate it. And there was huge lines in the gas stations. And ultimately, it was resolved 2 days back. And it was either because they paid the ransom, which was in millions of dollars, or it was because of the President Biden threatening the ransomware gang that if they don't do anything, they will shut them down. And yes, ultimately they were shut down. Their servers was gone, their CDN was gone, and their website is gone. That's the world we are living in. And then more recently, there was a ransomware attack with a similar demand in the UK, where one of the biggest healthcare institutions was hacked. With that, let's dig deep into our topic today, which is AI and ransomware. So our first question is, how can AI help detect and stop a ransomware attack? The two pieces to it, one is detect and stop. The detect portion is a little bit easier. So a lot of these ransomware attacks, how they happen is either through a breach of physical security, where somebody will implant the malware physically. So it could be through a point of system or a POS, point of sales item, where they are physically inside. They attach a USB drive, or they attach something that will download that malware into your computer. The other way is through outside, which is through phishing attacks, where you are clicking on something which activates a link, and that's how you get the malware. There's also a third way to it, which is unsecured network itself. So remote desktop connections is one of them. There's a certain port where RDP, or remote desktop protocols, actually work, and if those ports are not secure, or you don't have enough right passwords for that, the intruder is able to get in, implant the malware, and when you click on the malware or something happens, your data gets encrypted, and then they will ask for ransomware. So on the detect portion of this is easier. Some of the intrusion prevention or detection systems are AI based today. The interesting part is that yes, those systems from McAfee or Symantec, for example, are AI based, where they evolve to some extent using deep learning. So they learn what kind of traffic they're getting in. Sometimes it's based on the old tactics, so they will have those things in a database. Sometimes it'll be new, and that's where artificial intelligence could actually help, where it will learn for using something like supervised learning, and most recently some of these systems are even now using unsupervised learning, where these systems learn or are trained on these data sets or these previous intrusions, and they're able to proactively detect these intrusions. But at the same time, these technologies are sometimes open source and they're also available to these malware criminal gangs. And that's what makes things interesting. And that's where something like unsupervised learning works very well, where your system is able to detect and it evolves over time based on new variants of these malware, for example. Once your machine is infected, that's a harder ball game to tackle. But at least stopping is easier. You detect and then you stop the traffic from coming in, or you actually automatically remove some of these malicious malware or files. There are also ways that once your computer is infected, there are websites which have a mass amount of decryption algorithms that you can apply. And to some extent, you can use that in an automated way as well, but it's easier to just do it that way. Our second question is, did AI play a role in helping to track down the Colonial Pipeline hackers? For people who don't know how this happened or how this ransomware gang was actually paid, just a very quick summary without really going into details about who the gang was. I will just say that this specific malware or ransomware gang was based in Eastern Europe, where they got the malware from one of the developers, and that's how the malware or the ransomware gangs operate. That you will have in the value chain, you will have the actual developers who will create these ransomwares, and then these sometimes would be sold as ransomware as a service, where you can buy the malware, you can buy the expertise to deploy it, and that's where some of these affiliates come into picture in the value chain of this ransomware, and then these affiliates will go ahead and deploy these or try to infiltrate companies. And that's what's really happened, that the ransomware was built, it was deployed by one of the affiliates, and ultimately the Colonial Pipeline was infected. The transactions in all this was done through cryptocurrency, specifically Bitcoin. And it was most recently revealed that Colonial Pipeline did pay a few $1 million to the ransomware gang for it. Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies can be tracked, and that's where AI to some extent come into picture. There are a few tools that could be used that are AI based, where you can track some of these, where did that money go, even before it reached a cryptocurrency a wallet or a marketplace. And that's where one of the places I would say where AI was used, or must have been used to track down these hackers. The second area obviously is once you are hacked, to try to figure out what are the decryption keys. And based on the public available information, the Colonial Pipeline folks did pay the ransomware gang. Now, whether they got the money back or not, that we don't know. But at the same time, they were paid. AI would have actually helped to track some of these touch points on who else was involved in the overall in the hacking. Our third question is role of AI in cybersecurity, while on the other side helping cyber criminals. Every coin has two sides. So on one end, AI could be used for cybersecurity, and I mentioned about how we could have these dynamic, evolving incident detection and response systems. But on the other side, the cyber criminals may also have these tools. It's a interesting problem to tackle because having some of these AI tools that could help prevent these cyber attacks is important, and they should be open source to some extent so that it's widely available. For example, in the cyber espionage to Colonial Pipeline hackers, it was revealed that this specific gang was paid close to $90 million in the last 12 to 18 months. So the Colonial Pipeline paid about $2 million, but there was a lot more that these cyber criminals actually made. And some of them were not big companies, or some of them were not critical infrastructure like a pipeline or a healthcare institution. And that's where it's important to have some of these artificial intelligence tools available as open source. Another aspect is that some of these tools, when they're open source, it's much easier to really figure out how good these tools are, or these tools themselves are not really infected with malware. But on the other side, these tools are still available to cyber criminals. I believe that is okay in the sense that if the ground field is leveled, we, the good guys, could do much more than some of these few cyber criminals. And that's what makes me believe is that artificial intelligence is a very important tool to stop some of these cyber attacks and actually be proactive about going after some of these cyber criminals. And I believe we will see more and more of these cyber criminals going down in the next 6 to 8 months. We'll be back next week, same time. If you have questions on AI ransomware, please feel free to reach out to us. We'll try to cover something else next week, or if you like to learn more about ransomware and how AI could help, we could cover that. Please reach out. Our email is there. And again, my name is Aditya. I'm the founder of Skive and Robometrics Machine. And yes, we are hiring.